On Sunday, September the 13th, 2020, that Sunday I talked about three kinds of people. The first being those that forgive, and those who are forgiven, and those that are unforgiving. This evening I'm going to talk about a fourth group of people, the unforgiven. What about them? What about the people who live their lives in a state of being unforgiven? And from a biblical point of view, what happens to people who are unforgiven? What is their fate? So right now I'm going to just tell you what my conclusion is, and then you'll be able to follow it a bit easier so that you know what to expect. I do not think on biblical grounds that there are any people who are not forgiven by God. Though there are plenty of people among us, perhaps yourself, me, who might be unforgiven by other people. This topic, I think, needs at least a sermon for itself, and even more than one sermon, perhaps. But we'll try to say something, I hope, that is useful for our time here this evening. The unforgiven. This is a particularly timely topic for today. It may seem to some of us, perhaps, that unforgivingness is not really a timely subject because we live, or supposedly live, in a characteristically enlightened society which teaches us to be accepting and open-minded, or at least that's what we might expect of a truly enlightened society. And therefore we should think that that society would be forgiving. At least that's what one would think. But that is not the way things are. Or at least that is not the way things are headed, and I think it's getting worse. And perhaps you might agree. And if that is so, the message that God forgives us in Jesus Christ is very important for us today. The noted psychologist Jonathan Haidt, he describes himself as a once left-leaning person, a liberal, I suppose, but now thinks of himself as more like a centrist, but leaning left. As Dr. Haidt and many others, as well as anyone sitting here, anyone in this virtual audience this evening, we are living in a culture, a society, that is spring-loaded to take offense. That is, we as a nation, on the average, are very quick to feel offended. And very increasingly, those who are offended these days are more and more likely to be unforgiving. And to be unforgiving, they often believe, is the right thing to do. It's the right way to be. Our young people today are being raised, in fact, to think in exactly these terms. And this is done, says Dr. Haidt, by teaching what he calls the three terrible ideas. And here are the three terrible ideas. First, what doesn't kill you makes you would guess stronger. But that is actually a rather good idea. The terrible form of that idea is this: what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Any kind of trouble you run into, any kind of hurt you have doesn't make you stronger. According to this idea, it makes you weaker. And so you have to be protected from any kind of experience that might cause you to have to take into account another person's attitude. Perhaps you're hurt by their opinion. Perhaps you don't do anything risky at all because you might be hurt. This is the first of our three terrible ideas. What doesn't kill you makes you weaker. The second terrible idea is this: always trust your feelings. Always trust your feelings. No matter what it is. No matter whether that feeling is warranted or not. Always trust your ideas. The third terrible idea is this: life is a battle between good people and evil people. If you take all of these things together, the result is a call-out culture. It is a cancel culture. Canceling meaning to get rid of. To get rid of all the evil people. I first ran into these three terrible ideas way back in the late 1980s when the Air Force began sending second lieutenants out who'd graduated from college to Air Force bases all over the world, all over the United States, to teach sensitivity. The idea was a good one. It was a noble cause. It was to make the Air Force a more cohesive fighting unit by increasing the sensitivity of Air Force leaders to the cross currents of culture in the wider society. I spent 3 hours in a class, and I received that training, being totally and completely confused. Examples of sensitivity were given, and in every case, cohesiveness, we were told, is made weaker by not validating other people's feelings, and that was it. You are not to question feelings. Feelings are never wrong. According to these three terrible ideas, if you were to apply them to cohesiveness, cohesiveness is weakened when cohesiveness is challenged. Cohesiveness is challenged when you or someone else says something offensive. Something is offensive if someone feels it to be so, without question, because feelings are always to be trusted. And to get increased cohesiveness, it is important to identify offenders and correct or remove them. Now, I don't remember that training being continued very long. I don't know actually what happened. We were never informed. I just don't remember it being followed up. But I think it's pretty easy to see that cohesiveness, you know the answer to this, cohesiveness is only increased when cohesiveness is challenged. When a unit is under fire, if we use the military example, it very quickly comes together for self-preservation. When your life depends on this person next to you, or that person there, or the one behind you, when your life is dependent on them and theirs on you, you You get cohesive very quickly. You cohere. Muscles become stronger when the weights you are lifting are increased. Bones become stronger when they are subjected to stress. They don't become weaker. Bones become weak in spaceflight because of the lack of gravity, which stresses the human frame. It's a danger in space. If one stays too long, one's bones become very weak. People live with less anxiety and depression when they are not fearful of being called out and accused, and where there is no hope of forgiveness. They are fearful. They are labeled evil people. That is why, says Dr. Haidt, that our Generation Z children, those born around or after around 1995, have experienced an increase in levels of anxiety by 189% as measured by increased hospitalizations for anxiety or depression. These young people do not say they suffer from stress or any other emotional illness or stressor of any kind. Just anxiety and depression. They are not stressed out by schoolwork or other work. They're hardworking and they try to achieve their goals. No, they are afraid. They're afraid and they're saddened. They are anxious because they are walking on eggshells all the time. They are sad because they see no hope. If they are called out, pointed at, accused with no hope of forgiveness at all, there's no chance for forgiveness. Why would then one ever apologize if you're only going to be accused and canceled, lose your job, your position? That is the result of living in unforgiveness. In a world that will not, even cannot, and forbids forgiveness, and believes that unforgiveness is actually good and right. But here is the good news. No one is unforgiven by God. God will not cancel you. That is what cancel culture does. It tries to get you fired, removed from your workplace, or harassed out of town. God will not cancel you. Meaning you will not be cast away. God will not cancel anyone. You are not canceled. That does not mean that we don't live in fear of it. And that's what's causing all the anxiety and depression. You are not canceled by God. But that does not mean that God does not recognize your sins, your evil that you've done, or thought, or said. God does recognize all these things, all these evils. But the amazing, beautiful truth is, He nevertheless forgives you. You are not unforgiven. He will not cast you away. Instead, He will put you through the fire. Do you know what the fire is in Mark 9? Read these verses over, and especially verse 49. Come back next Sunday to find out just what that fire is.